Okay. So Gordon, can you just maybe just tell us a bit about your work with Portmore Community Council, how long you've worked with them, and the sort of type of work that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. I've worked with the guys, I think, since about 2009. At that time, they had a reasonable looking website. The chap who managed that for them, I think, left the area. There was a call for help. Does anybody know roughly how to get websites, email up and running? I thought, yeah, well, I've done a bit of that for my own business. Happy to help out. So I've been looking after the website one way or another since 2009. I would say I know enough to be dangerous because I'm an engineer. So I'm not a website designer per se, but we had a nice little model from one of the businesses I was involved with. I sort of plagiarized that, changed the styling a little bit, and suddenly you've got an embryonic community council website. So that worked well. We've just kept it up to speed over the years. We made it responsive a few years ago, so it works well on mobile devices, whereas it had been really a desktop lump before. I've done some sort of digital mapping stuff. That's just kind of hobby interest for me, but it's been great for the CC to sort of help visualize. We've got a lot of nasty pipes, shall we say, running through our 12, 14 square miles. We've got a 36-inch diameter 40s feed pipe. We've got various natural gas. So when the guys were looking at a resilience planning thing and where the CC fitted into the bigger Perth and Kinross safety plans, they were kind of interested in where exactly are all these nasty things. So it was quite easy to just help visualize that on a map. And we've done a few other things like the site boundaries when they've been changed, the area that the CC has responsibility for. I've done some stuff through them with the local development trust who needed to map their area by postcode zones. So all these little things just sort of pop up. Or when we've needed to do the odd presentation, whatever, Muggins here can pop things together. So it's worked well. I'm not a member of the CC. I'm just a resource that's worked with them for over a decade now. So it seems to work quite well. Back in February, kind of out of the blue, we got a message from Perth and Kinross just saying that the Cabinet Office, Government Digital Services have decided that CCs need to comply with the guidelines. And then it helpfully said, the first point is don't panic. The Cabinet Office is aware that small organisations don't have capacity or resources, blah, blah. The simplest thing you can do is put up a statement on your website so that if the public encounters a problem with the site, they can contact you. So my secretary of the CC sent me this and said, looks very simple, Gordon. Can you just pop that up on the site? I thought, wait a minute. Accessibility does not come from a short statement and how to contact us. We've got a contact page. So I think that was a nice kind of rose-coloured spectacles view of what accessibility is all about. As soon as you start looking, yes, you need an accessibility statement, but you kind of need to understand what's wrong with your website in terms of people with vision or motor problems who can't easily control a mouse, even colour blindness. You need to kind of understand where the issues are, what you could realistically do about them. There's maybe some, in the terminology of the thing, would be a disproportionate burden. But that's a kind of, you can't just use that as a get out because you're a small group. All of this makes sense in trying to make, for what I've said before, trying to make what we do as accessible to as many people as we can. Just saying, nah, I can't be bothered to write a statement isn't going to work. So the more I read, the more I thought, oh my goodness, there's a heck of a lot of work to do here, which is sort of how I came around to talking with you some time ago, having a look at the your own team's website and realizing that there are a few free tools out there that can help folk like me who don't really have, I don't have the budget, I don't have the time. We're certainly not going to be spending 5, 6, 7 grand on paying somebody else to tell us what's wrong with our website and then how to fix it. So it took me quite a bit of time to figure out what might be useful to us. And then we found a couple of tools that I think are extremely good. You simply run them on a browser, looking at your own website, or indeed anybody else's, if you want to have a look at how they've achieved it. And these things literally point out, in technical speak to some extent, but they point out precisely what's wrong with different bits of your website, and which bits of the accessibility standards you're not complying with, and then suggest what exactly you're going to need to do to fix them. And that can be at a fairly low level if you're not a website designer. But what I would say is being able to get a report of what's needing addressed in your website is cheap and free if you don't mind sitting here and going through each page one by one, pulling off the reports. You could then take it to your expert if you're not one yourself, and at least you've got a list of what needs done. And then the tricky thing is to think about, well, what can we realistically do right now? What can we do in the future? What's essential from core business perspective, as opposed to just, in our case, archive minutes aren't core business. So there's not too much point in trying to make those fabulously accessible. All the PDFs are perfectly readable by a screen reader, but perhaps could do with headings in the right sequence, whatever. So I think figuring out what's wrong is challenge number one. Free tools are excellent. And then the difficulty might be for a lot of folks, where do you get the resource to actually make the low-level changes? But if a CC's got a website in the first place, somebody must be maintaining it. If you give them the printouts from these report tools, I imagine that they could get 75% of the way along in a few days. But at first it seems daunting.
So where can you maybe just tell us about the tools that you used?
Yeah, I used there's a product called Wave. It's an acronym, so it's capital WAVE, which is a plugin for any of the popular browsers. It's available to plug into Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, or whatever it's called now. It's free to download from the internet. Once it's installed in your browser, you literally point the browser as you normally would, in my case at portmoke.org, right-click on the screen, and up comes a little link that says Wave this page. The moment you do that, the tool puts some little sort of red or amber flags dotted around your screen where it's finding problems, and gives you a quick list of, you've got sort of 8 hard errors where you don't comply with some bit of the standard. You've got whatever, 5, 6 warnings where there's something could be better, but it's not a massive issue. And then these little flags you can sort of click on to get an in-detailed look. You're missing a bit of alternative text on a clickable image here. That can let you drill right down to literally the line of code on the web page that needs addressed. So I found Wave an absolutely fabulous tool for doing that. The other tool I used was HTML Code Sniffer, which again is a free download from the internet. Similar thing, it's a plugin, or it's actually a thing called a bookmarklet, but nevertheless, it's still a plugin that sits in all the browsers. That does much the same thing, but it kind of, perhaps more subtle things, like where you've used quite faint text against a relatively faint background, which might not be good with people with vision issues, or the use of colours that might be difficult for people with colour blindness problems. Those sort of more subtle things, HTML Code Sniffer I found was very good at saying the contrast ratio on this top bar is 6%, it needs to be whatever. Here's the bits of your style sheet that need to be tweaked to get that adjusted. So between the two tools, I ended up with a nice, relatively short list. It impacted most of our pages, but to be fair, we've only got 16 actual pages around the website. Obviously, some of them have multiple documents to download, and the site's template driven. So a few of the things are fixed once in the template, and then it just, automatically sprays across the other 16. So it took me a couple or 3 days on and off to get from maybe a dozen errors, half a dozen warnings, down to something that's fine, and off we go.
Mhm.
With a few limitations, which you have to identify in your accessibility statement. Because we use Zoom meetings, there might be an issue with, do you need to caption video? Well, you would if it were some sort of training or whatever. Live video doesn't need to be captioned, say, at the standard, so that's fine, but we have to identify in our statement that that's why we're not captioning it. It's not required. Some of our PDF documents are very old. It would be very time consuming to try and change them, but we're not obliged to fix anything before 2018. Again, that's fine as long as we identify that. And I think that was about it. In the end, we really kind of got down to, we fixed all the main things that were wrong with the sort of core business bit of the website. Identified the PDF issue, the live video issue, tweaked the model statement. To be fair, we kind of plagiarized the one from your own team's website because the issues were more or less the same.
Right.
What I hadn't immediately realised from reading the model statement, it's not just cut and paste and fill in every box. You take the sections that apply to issues with your website, or you rewrite them to it. So at first it looks like this enormous list you've got to address, but not really. This is a model. You score out the bits you don't need, complete the bits you do. So we got down to something that was quite a manageable size to pop up on the website. And I hadn't realised that till I'd looked at some other public sector, your website, and thought, it's not as difficult as it looks. And you guys also referenced these two tools, so I thought, let's have a look at those. So that gave us a huge start. So it works. It's not too arduous.
Well, that's great. It's great to hear that we've been able to help you to start that process. You said did you say it took you about 3 days? Is that
yeah?
What sort of time would you spend on that?
The learning bit was the trickiest bit. It's the usual thing. Once you know what you're doing, it's easy. It was oh gosh, where do I find a tool that's going to do this? So I downloaded a sort of £100 package 30-day trial version. Thought, oh, right, well, this is kind of doing what I need. But you can't run that every other month to see if it's still compliant. There must be so you kind of burn a lot of time looking for the tools that are going to tell you what the heck are you looking to fix in the first place. So really, I'd faffed around for a week or so until I thought, I'll phone you guys and see if there's any help. In amongst that, before you and I had a chat, noticed these two tools, had to play with them, thought, this is all I need to do what I need to do. So that burned, a couple of days faffing around with research on and off, actually doing the job, 2-3 hours realistically in our case.
Okay.
We were
what would you say?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say we're fortunate that the secretary that we have at the moment is slightly coincidentally creating Word documents which are intrinsically accessible, and now she's up to speed with just clicking the little check accessibility button in Word. So any minutes, any other communications that the CC puts together fortuitously in the last year have already been accessible.
Oh, that's good.
But now our secretary is making sure that if you create an accessible Word document, you will get an accessible PDF for me to put up on the site. So certainly the last year, 18 months worth of stuff has coincidentally already been good for us, but we just have our last doing a quick click and it's all fine.
That's great. You seem, if you don't mind me saying, you seem pretty clued up on the sort of like digital stuff and the internet and how you find things and so on. What would you say to someone on a community council who's just been tasked with trying to get their website to comply with this legislation?
I would now, without hesitation, and I'm a techie guy, have been all my life. I like tools that are simple to drive. Yes, I understand complex things, but that's fine. You don't need to learn some fantastically complicated program. These two tools kind of blew me away. And I have to say, I'm not here to sell them. I was just pleasantly surprised that 2 free things at the click of a button pop up with a nice little chart of sort of traffic lights. You've got this number of red warnings, this number of amber, and you've got this number of good points. And then it physically identifies on the screen. I would say cheat immediately, download those tools, get on with finding out what's wrong with your site, courtesy of them. Will take you really as many minutes as it takes you to go around each page of your website. So there's a little bit of donkey work, but we've got less than 20 pages make up our website. That's probably okay for most people. Some of those might have lots of downloads, lots of minutes, whatever. But the number of pages probably isn't huge for a CC. So you bounce around, browse to each one of those, click the tools. You've got a report within a matter of minutes. Then the next bit is obviously a little bit techie, depending on whether you're a website designer or understand the background, understand what these tools are telling you need to fix. That might be where some CCs need a bit of help. Sometimes websites have been set up for them a while ago, perhaps with some grant money or whatever, and now they've simply got, a WordPress or whatever front end, and they just pop stuff up there. If you don't understand what's in behind, you're probably going to need some outside help to fix it. In that respect, I'm lucky because I built our websites. I'm not an expert, but I built them, so I know how to fix them. So I think that would be the only tricky bit. People can assess the problems very quickly with those tools. Whether or not they have the skills to fix them quickly could be the difficulty.